All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to the Gunner Technology Livestream, a weekly tech talk for non-techies and techies alike, brought to you by uConsent. Check out the uConsent app at uconsentapp.com. I'm Derry Merkins. With me again is President and CEO of Gunner Technology, Cody Swan. Cody, how you doing?
I am just fine. Just
It's been a heck of a week with
yeah,
all
man.
the uConsent stuff going on.
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind of media interviews and such.
Media blitz, I think they call those.
Yeah, the media blitz, which is offensive to the people who survived the Blitzkrieg during World War II.
That's right. Yeah, very insensitive. Shout out to our sponsor, Country Shore, a lifestyle brand for anyone who loves the outdoors. Visit them at countryshoreoutfitters.com and head to our Facebook page and sign up for the Country Shore giveaway, which we actually have a winner not from the Southeast this week, which is exciting. So Thomas S. from Seattle, Washington actually won the Country Shore giveaway this week. So Thomas S., you've got
a Country Shore raincoat.
Yeah, that's what we should. Yeah, some Country Shore galoshes heading your way. But you got a sweet hat coming your way and copies of our ebooks heading your way too. So enjoy those and make sure to head to our Facebook page to sign up for next week's Country Shore giveaway. Also on our Facebook page is the question of the week, which Cody, take that away.
Oh yeah, the question of the week. I am slacking. Hold on a second. I got to bring this up. And I haven't even thought of a new question of the week this week because we switched up the writing blog posts. I usually do the question of the week. Time. Yeah. So I dropped the ball on that one. I just totally forgot about it.
Well, the question of the week last week was whether you would pay more, whether you would sign up for TV packages to boost your internet speed.
Yeah, would you pay for cable if it were the only way you could get faster in-home Wi-Fi? And 76% of people said yes.
Wow, that's actually shocking.
I know
I would never pay for cable to get faster internet.
What's the analogy there? Like that's like paying.
There's some sort of mafia analogy. It's some sort of extortion analogy.
That's right. Yeah, like the only way you could keep your store open was if you paid for protection. Would you pay for protection?
Right. Yeah, I guess cable is protection in that analogy. It's a perfect analogy.
Flawless.
That's actually really interesting. Yeah, I would think that part of the reason that cable is dying is that they just can't convince people to get it anymore. There's so much free material out there. It's actually unbelievable.
Oh yeah, I would not want to be. And the thing is I have this number from Chicago that calls me every day. It's a Comcast number, and I could easily block the number, but I just pretend to give them hope. So I let them dial through every day, and I just let it go to voicemail.
Just like that. What's that movie, Boiler Room, where the guy just leads him on when he's making his pitch, and then tells him everything that's wrong with him, how he's terrible. That's really interesting. So I guess question of the week next week, people should head to our Facebook page for that once you figure it out, or should we come up with one right now?
Yeah, no. We can come up with one right now, but I'll put it on the Facebook page and send it in the put it in the newsletter too.
I would be curious what percentage of media is consumed online versus not. So old school methods versus watching videos on YouTube. Because especially with the younger generation, it seems like YouTube and Twitch are 90% of their media consumption.
Oh gosh, at least. But yeah, when you're talking about like getting news and stuff like that, I mean, newspapers don't even really deliver anymore. I mean, it's crazy. I would say it's like 99.9% of content is consumed via connected device these days. Yeah.
So I guess how should we word that? Just have a couple options for percentages of media consumption that is through digital media.
Okay. So we'll move the question of the week to Twitter, since Facebook only allows you to have two choices. So
how about more or less than what would be
100%?
Yeah. Maybe 80%.
Yeah. Okay. What do you?
75%, more or less. 75% of your content is consumed through digital media.
That works. So think about that. Take a while to think about that. Well, we get it up on.
That's probably a terrible number. I feel like that's a line, and I just said a terrible line. We're just going to get 100% over 75%.
That's right.
Anyways, we'll move on now to our our episode's question of the week, which is, what are the differences working with the private sector versus working with entrepreneurs?
I was going to say you should say the topic du jour, but then I was going to say you should say it in Italian, since we just did the Italian interview with the Italian. But I don't.
Topic du jour.
Yeah, that's it. I think you nailed it. I think you got it exactly right. So, yeah, so we're doing this kind of survey of the different types of clients that we deal with, which kind of runs the gamut. But last week we did entrepreneurs and public sector, which was kind of like diametric opposites. And today we're moving a little bit closer as we talk about the private sector and entrepreneurs, as a lot of times the line can be a little bit fuzzy, because sometimes our client will be an established private sector company, yet they'll want us to do entrepreneurial work in sort of, like they call it in the MBA program, they call it intrapreneurial work. So kind of the lines are blurred, because a lot of times the companies are looking for us to invent something for them.
So I guess, would that be something akin to what we did at ESPN with a lot of the stuff for the social media group? A lot of it was experimenting with new technologies, trying new stuff out, all within the overarching ESPN company.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that would be considered intrapreneurial, or like R&D type stuff. R&D type stuff is a lot of the things we do for other companies. So when you're talking about that, you're talking about a type of client, but the type of work is very similar in terms of what you're actually doing. Like, you're trying to invent something for the company, whereas for an entrepreneur, you're kind of trying to invent something for like the masses kind of thing.
So private sector companies kind of have their bread and butter product, but they might be interested in expanding beyond that and trying something wildly different, or something that's never been done before, just to try and boost their revenue.
Yeah, exactly. So take Amazon, for example, which they have their core business product, and they want to expand it by delivering stuff via drone. That is entrepreneurial. And again, they develop that in-house, but a lot of times companies will hire a company like ours to kind of do that work, at least the prototyping of that work for them. So that's the type of thing where, and then very easily on the flip side, an individual entrepreneur could have the idea to deliver things via drone. And then that would be their standalone business. The difference, as you said, is in the case of Amazon, they're extending their core business versus inventing a whole new business.
So there is a lot of overlap. And I guess a lot of the opportunities with the private sector are more entrepreneurial in scope, as opposed to helping out their established business. Although there are opportunities there with, maybe updating the technology or improving the technology, or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when you're talking about and again, entrepreneurial work can become non-entrepreneurial work. So once
Exactly,
the product
sort of a level there, once it gets to that, it sort of phases out of entrepreneurial and becomes more of an established private sector enterprise.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the transition there too.
So what are the differences as far as, let's just take the examples of an established product versus somebody who has a brand new idea and just wants to try something out, or even a company that has a brand new idea and wants to try something out?
Yeah, well, I think from the high level overview of the difference, or where a company has an idea versus an individual has an idea, I think the big difference, generally speaking, is funding. Now, it's very possible that an individual could be very well funded just based off their idea. That's usually not the case. Usually they are trying to develop a prototype so that they can receive funding to bring that prototype to market. Whereas with it's a company, usually they'll have a pretty decent R&D budget, so to speak, so they can fund the prototype pretty well, and then again fund it beyond prototype into kind of the standard piece of the business.
And so I guess, what's the experience with private sector versus entrepreneurial work in terms of scope, in terms of planning, execution, stuff like that? It seems more like the private sector entrepreneurial work, or even the work that's explicitly for existing products in the private sector, would be more akin to the public sector in terms of knowledge of what they want built, control of budget and timeline, stuff like that.
Yeah, and the other thing it's kind of interesting about the doing entrepreneurial work or entrepreneurial work for companies is that a project can be dropped at the drop of a hat, meaning priorities shift a lot quicker within a company than they do in the entrepreneurial world. So you could be working on something entrepreneurial for a company, and they're like, you know what, this just took off, or this just became much more important. So let's change this now and have you working on this. Whereas you're working with an individual entrepreneur, sure, you can pivot, sure, the product can be tweaked and changed a little bit, but the overall vision is pretty static, and it's not like you're just going to drop the product to move on to something different.
Well, I guess an interesting thing there too is, especially as the private sector relates to the public sector, is that if they have an established product or an established business, it's much easier for them to just drop some, entrepreneurial project that they're working on because they have something to fall back on. They have an established revenue stream. Whereas entrepreneurs, a lot of the times, it's really all they're focused on at that moment.
Right. I mean, they have their entire focus is developing this one product and getting this to market. There's not competing interests. Yeah, assuming the entrepreneur, as we've seen sometimes, the entrepreneur tries to kind of moonlight as an entrepreneur. But yeah, there's not going to be like the changing priorities or anything like that.
A question on YouTube: do you guys prefer working with private sector clients or with entrepreneurial clients? And I guess we're imagining, we're not considering the entrepreneurial work that we do for private sector clients, but I guess the more explicit, we have this business we've been running for 5 years, but the technology is outdated. We need to update it. We need to improve it, kind of thing.
Yeah, and again, like we said last week, you want a healthy mix, and there's pros and cons of both. Like you said, it can be pretty frustrating if you're going full bore on something and then priorities change and you just kind of drop what you were working on halfway through and may never pick it up again. So that's frustrating. At the same time, talking about, we've had it where we've worked with entrepreneurs who are moonlighting as entrepreneurs and they have full-time jobs, and all of a sudden they get like a promotion at work and they decide that that they no longer want to moonlight as entrepreneurs, and the project gets dropped as well. So you can't escape the cons of either side, but the kind of pros for working with an entrepreneur are generally the entrepreneur is extremely focused and also kind of acknowledges the fact that they are working in a space that they're not familiar with. They're taking a big risk here, and they really want every ounce of expertise you can provide them. Whereas working with companies, they tend to think because it's their business, they know a lot about everything, where I'm sure they know a lot about their business, but they may not understand a lot behind the technology. So they kind of try to dictate things that probably shouldn't be dictated to kind of the experts in technology.
I think an interesting thing too is it's sort of just human nature to be, and we actually talked about this last week, but it's sort of human nature to be more excited about new stuff. New products, new ideas. So even in the private sector, when you're building out new features or new apps that are maybe unrelated to the core business product, people get really hyped about that stuff. And especially with entrepreneurs who have this grand vision and their world-changing idea, it's incredible how excited they are about the work that you're doing for them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's a lot more of appreciation. That's not to say that there is an appreciation in the corporate world because you build something that's going to automate something or increase the top line or decrease the no. And I just confused myself.
The bottom line.
Yes, exactly. Then you're going to have appreciation, but entrepreneurs, obviously, a lot of them want to be profitable from their idea. However, there's just more excitement in seeing their ideas brought to life, where it's just kind of like you can feed off of their energy a lot.
Yeah, I guess I'm more referencing the improvement of existing stuff versus the invention of something completely new. I've sort of noticed that there's more excitement and more appreciation when you come up with something completely new. It seems to blow people away more than just, we made this existing thing much, much faster.
Yeah, I think it definitely is kind of like a symptom where they take it for granted, where something's existing, and so it's easier to make it better, or it's incrementally better to kind of improve the technology. Whereas something that just didn't exist before, it's almost like pulling a rabbit out of your hat, where it's like, oh, there it is. Didn't think that was going to come, but wow, there's a rabbit right there. And
Yeah, definitely.
there's a lot more kind of like shock value, I guess, that you say in that regard.
The novelty factor definitely plays a role there. The other thing I was going to mention too is a lot of the private sector work for established products or established businesses is more akin to the public sector in terms of exactly what you're going to be working on. So, we talked about with public sector versus entrepreneurs, there's the issue of moving goalposts. There's the issue of you don't know when something is done, and there's the issue of people not wanting something to be done until it's perfect. I think with the private sector, with the private sector's established products and businesses, there's much less of an issue there in terms of you're just you're trying to improve something that's already been proven, basically.
Right, and by the way, it gets harder to do. The more established something is, the less room there is for improvement. By and large, as long as it's maintained. You see in the public sector things that just kind of aren't maintained, and they get so crufty that you can make kind of orders of magnitude improvement upon the performance or the functionality of a piece of software just because it's been kind of let sit there for a long time. But it really does, the more you work on something, the more you're going to experiencing diminishing returns.
There's a difference working private sector versus entrepreneurs too, that's also kind of analogous to the public sector versus entrepreneurs in terms of the ongoing relationship. Talk about that a little bit in terms of the long-term goals of private sector projects versus entrepreneurial projects, and the long-term relationship differences between the two.
Yeah, so actually that's a really good question, or a really good point, because the relationships are different and similar. So like we said, with the public sector, it's very possible that you'll never work with the same people in an agency ever again. No matter how successful you were, once it's done, maybe that's all they want. And then you just kind of have to go back to the drawing board and bid on other opportunities that come out of the agency. So you may never work on anything beyond that first project with that group of people ever again. So, you can have good relationships with the people you're working with. It's much more distant or informal, or I say you say formal in that regard. Whereas in the private sector, you're kind of most of the time you're in it for the long haul. You guys, like I said, we've had Thanksgiving dinner with our clients, birthdays. Like, we really form a bond with our clients. Entrepreneurs, they can go one of two ways, right? So generally, the relationship initially works like this. You kind of are very close. You're a very close team working on building that prototype or that MVP. And then once the MVP is built, it's kind of on the entrepreneur to take it to the next step. And that's to market the product, generate a user base, and get investment. We're there to offer guidance, but our part of the relationship at that point is largely finished. Now, if the entrepreneur is successful in their end of the bargain to getting to that next level, then we form a very tight relationship where there's funding, and we're really growing the product and building now not just a product, but building a business around that product. That's when the relationship really starts to get tight. So it can go one of two ways. If the entrepreneur isn't able to market and raise money for the app, it's kind of like we lose touch and don't see or hear that person maybe ever again, because maybe they just go back into the private sector and do whatever. Or maybe in a couple of years they'll try another idea. But it's really like one or the other with an entrepreneurial client, where either they're going to get past that hump and we're going to have a really close relationship, or our relationship is going to be short term because they're not going to get past that initial hump.
That's actually really interesting too from a marketing angle, because if you think about it, just to be successful in the private sector, there has to be some sort of marketing already in place just to get the word out about their existing product or their existing service. And what's interesting is with the entrepreneurial stuff that we do with the private sector, a lot of that marketing capability or domain knowledge or even just folks they know can be rolled over to the entrepreneurial project. I think that's more of an issue with the entrepreneurial side in terms of, I guess, who they know, how capable they are at marketing their idea, how capable they are at, hiring people to market their idea. It's much more of a risk factor there, just in terms of being able to actually sell the app that you build for them.
Right. And at the same time, with private sector clients, you have a built-in user base. So even if you're inventing, something new, entrepreneurial, that you have the ability to kind of force a market to use it. See what I'm saying? So if we develop a new way to do data entry, for example, our client has the ability to say, hey, everyone in the company is going to use this new technology to do data entry. They don't really have to market it so much. They don't have to get buy-in. They can kind of force buy-in on their side. So it's not like they have to create a pool of users to try out their new idea. They have that readily available to them. Same thing where we're developing new ideas for B2B type companies, where we build something for our client who then offers it to their clients. They already have that client relationship. They don't have to go out and find a new client. They say, hey, client A, we have this new technology that you really should take a look at. So try it out. Like there's much less marketing necessary in that relationship as well.
There's another interesting difference too, in terms of, at least what I found, is that small business owners tend to have interactions or be involved with, or even have founded multiple businesses. So I guess there's the serial entrepreneur who has, 1,000 ideas and tries to build all of them. But that's a much harder proposition than simply owning, 5 small businesses instead of 1 small business. And there's a lot of transition between, if you can prove your abilities with one private sector client, there's a high likelihood that they have additional opportunities for you in the private sector.
Yeah, that's really true. Where, like I said, with that entrepreneurial relationship, there our facet of the scope is to build the MVP. That is what we do. And then after the MVP is built, there's like a lull in what we do, because there's no more work to do. Well, the entrepreneur kind of does the dog and pony show with the new technology. Whereas when you have a private sector client finishing one project, as long as you're successful, there's another project always waiting in the wings. There's always one waiting in the wings. So you can almost, while your new product is getting used and tested and seeing if it's useful, you're already working on something else. And then if that your new idea needs more work, then you come back to it after you're working on your next project. And it's just kind of a steady stream of work from the private sector.
We'll let Periscope ask the last question here. And the question is, do you prefer working with private sector clients or with entrepreneurial clients? It's kind of a tough one. I think we prefer working with great clients versus not great clients. I'm not sure private sector versus entrepreneurs is sort of the delineating factor there. We've had incredible success in both realms. Not too many negative experiences, so that's a tough call. It's more of just a personal preference, really.
Yeah, and it's kind of, again, like what projects are we talking about here? Because I think there's always like you said, an excitement around doing new stuff. So again, it's more the entrepreneurial type of work that I'm interested in, or that excites me, rather than the type of client. At the same time, excitement is only a piece of the what would you prefer, because the entrepreneurial work is also the work that initially doesn't pay very well. So you got to keep that in mind as well, where you're trying to determine an overall who would you prefer, or what do you prefer. Like we said last week, it's kind of like stocks and bonds versus cash kind of thing.
Yeah, and I will say that there is excitement in the private sector. I mean, it's actually maybe I'm just a huge dork, but it's really exciting to me to hear feedback from clients that, this process has never been easier. We've never been able to do something as quickly as we did this last month. or even, you know, bottom line effects where it's, you know, our revenues have increased by 10% just because of what you guys built. I mean, it's been incredible to see the results. That kind of stuff is really exciting to me.
Yeah, I think also something that we don't get from all our clients, however, it's really motivating to me, is to having insight on what the competition is doing. I don't mean our competition, I mean the client's competition. And like, because we want our client to have the best technology in the sector.
Yeah, it's always fun to out innovate competition.
Right. So it's really motivating to see if they have insight into what their competitors' technology is doing, to kind of try to crush the competition in terms of from an innovative technology perspective.
Yeah, so I think private sector and entrepreneurial work is actually pretty close in terms of they're more similar than they are to the public sector. The public sector is an entirely different beast, but private sector and entrepreneurial work are they're both really fun, and they're both incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So I think we'll leave it there. That'll do it for this week's episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. Make sure to catch us next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can check out the blog post for this episode at gunnertech.com, where you can also check out information about our app YouConsent at gunnertech.com/YouConsent, or check that out at youconsentapp.com. Check out our ebooks at Amazon, iBooks, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and anywhere else ebooks are sold. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Make sure to sign up for the Country Shore giveaway on our Facebook page, where you can win an awesome hat and copies of our ebooks. And also, while you're on our Facebook page, make sure to answer next week's question of the week, which I'm so nervous about what the results are going to be, because I think it's going to be a landslide victory. But remind him again, Cody, what the question is.
That was, do you consume more than 70% of your content?
Should make it 80%. Let's make it 80%.
Yeah, 80%. Do you consume more than 80% of your content through a connected device?
Gosh, that's going to be just going to be a complete wash. The yeses are going to be just boat race the nose.
Yep.
But hop on our Facebook page, sign up for the Country giveaway, answer the question of the week, and tune in next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for the next episode of the Gunner Technology Livestream. I'm Derry. That's Cody. We'll see you next week.